Welcome one and all to another episode of the Damage Report. I am John Iadarola, and I can almost speak without feeling physical pain. So I've got that going for me. But anyway, as those of you who've been watching for the past couple days know, I've been gradually getting more sick, and I apologize. I've, over the course of this week, grown quite wary. But anyway, we do have something awesome in our back pocket. Actually, two things. So first, perhaps more important, the more proximal. On Tuesday, we were supposed to be graced by the presence of Daria, and unfortunately it didn't work out for scheduling reasons, but that has now been corrected because Daria Rose joins us now. Daria, how's it going?
Hi guys, I'm happy to be here.
We're very glad to have you here. It's been a little bit since we spoke, and I think the last time you were on, the news was a little bit dark, but thankfully everything's great and America's awesome, so we're just gonna chit chat a little bit, so that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say these last 100 or so days have just gone as best as they can possibly have gone.
Yeah, well, I know that you've been busy, you were sick recently, you've been taking part in conferences and things like that. Well, what other work have you been doing lately that people should know about and maybe follow?
Definitely go check out my TikTok. Been talking a lot about what's happening at the Supreme Court. We've had a lot of recent oral arguments come out having to do with the deportations. So I've been explaining that a bit. If you're interested in hearing more about nationwide injunctions and why that's
Nice.
important. And if you want to learn about it from like a very chill, easy understanding perspective and not all the legalese, go check it out. I promise you'll walk away with a ton of information and
Nice.
in not a lot of time.
Or if you want to hear about it from a completely ignorant perspective, I could just talk about it. And I know technically what most of those words mean, so I could do that. But anyway, we're actually gonna be talking about the SCOTUS a little bit later on. And if there's time, a little bit more about judges more broadly, because there have been a lot of decisions coming down recently. And in fact, I don't think we're gonna be able to cover it on today's show. I need to read into it a little bit more. But this big, beautiful bill has basically everything in it, everything the right wants. And it actually has something bearing on the nationwide injunctions on it that I think Robert Reich wrote about it a little bit, but I haven't seen many people talking about it. A way to try to basically stop courts from enforcing, I think like contempt decisions or something like that in relation to it. But we're gonna look into that. We're gonna be talking about the initial passage, and there's a lot to talk about. The second surprise, though, is that coming up in the aftermath, we do unfortunately only get Daria for the first hour, but we're very lucky to have you even for that hour. So thank you, Daria. Very gracious of you. But on the aftermath, we have a candidate running in Michigan for Senate. He's been on the show before many years ago. Dr. Abdul is going to be joining us once again. We're going to talk about the midterms. We're going to talk about Medicare for all. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about young men. A lot of stuff. It's going to be good to catch up with Abdul after far too long between having him on the show. So that's the good news. We're gonna get to the bad news in a sec, but first, if you are on a platform where it makes sense, you can hit the like button, you can share the stream, send us your comments, your tweets, your super chats, all that. And heads up, as I've been telling you throughout the week, the member hangout is gonna be happening about 30 minutes after the close of the aftermath. I don't know if my voice will be audible at that point, but we're gonna try to hang out and chit chat a little bit. So for our tier 3 members on YouTube, definitely hang out. And just another reminder that I will be appearing at the Elysian Theater May 30th. It's a Friday for the Bituation Room, a live recording. So if you'd like to see me and Francesca and Matt Lieb and a number of other awesome activists, politicians, that sort of thing, you can go to elysiantheater.com for tickets. I believe there's still some available. I don't know how much longer they're gonna last. I don't have access to the system, but I think that if you go this week, you'll probably be okay. And with that, Daria, you ready to talk about the news?
Let's talk about it.
Awesome. Let's talk about the news. We have only the darkest, most tragic sort of story to begin the show with today. We have 2 staff members at the Israeli embassy in DC being shot and killed. And we have details on the victims, details on the alleged shooter. And obviously we have thoughts about this entire tragic incident. The victims have been identified as Sarah Lynn Milgram, who's responsible for organizing missions and visits to Israel from the embassy in DC. Yaron Lischinski, researcher in the political department, was the second. according to the Israeli ambassador, they were a couple that was about to be engaged. And I believe at least one of their families didn't even know about it yet and didn't find out until after they had been tragically shot and killed. And you're seeing a photo of them there as well. They had been coming out of this event that had to do with diplomacy, and we're still learning about the actual context of the event and all that. But, and we don't know too much about the victims, except that I have seen some sources saying that they were passionate about building peace, and that in particular, I believe Sarah was involved in building interfaith connections, basically diplomacy across different religious groups to try to work for peace. Now, details on the actual shooting, the suspect, I don't believe there's a lot of ambiguity about this, but it's Elias Rodriguez, a 30-year-old of Chicago. His home in Chicago has been raided. He was detained shortly after the shooting. Police officials said that a single suspect was seen pacing in front of the museum before the shooting on Wednesday. He approached 4 people who were leaving the event, shot the 2 victims, and then entered the museum, where he was detained by security officers. And in probably the detail most people will hear about this, as he was taken out, he exclaimed, "Free, free Palestine." So that combined with his manifesto, which has been made available online, I believe friend of the show Ken Klippenstein has actually published it on Substack, lays out all of the political motivations for this, if you're interested in that. But regardless of motivations, it's murder, and it's also textbook terrorism. It's the killing of unaffiliated civilians to accomplish political goals. And it's its own tragedy on the substance. These are 2 individuals. They were early on in their life. They were going to get married. They seem to have been working towards, at least in some sense, the same goals as the person who committed this attack. So just base level, this is an absolute tragedy. And then you get the political side of this, which is that this will be used by those who want to wipe every Palestinian off the face of the earth as a justification for doing that. And at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't matter that this will be used by them, because they are already doing so well in accomplishing that goal. And those who want to utterly demonize those who want peace in Palestine, want an end to the genocide, they were doing that before this shooting. They'd be doing it without the shooting. But you can rest assured that the next time Marco Rubio deports someone for writing an op-ed, he's gonna use this shooting as a justification for doing it. Because it previously looked pretty pathetic that he was so terrified by words typed up on a website, and that really seemed super against the First Amendment, and still is and will be when they do it in the future. But now they'll say, hey, there was this terrible guy, there was this monster who killed some civilians, and so anyone who chants a slogan, holds a sign, sits, on a quad of a campus, kind of affiliated with the same thing. It's gonna be nonsensical, but we know how American political media works, and so you can guarantee that that will be there. In any event, Daria, I know this is a really dark story. Feel free, comment on whatever aspect of this you would like to.
Definitely, this is such a tragedy. I mean, I read that they're just 26, 28 years old, getting started, trying to build peace outside of an embassy. From a political perspective, even thinking about the location of this in Washington, D.C., just kind of like a block away from the Capitol, I can imagine there's gonna be a lot of increased security. We're gonna continue to see what Netanyahu's response to this will be. He's already ordered, increase security outside of more diplomatic embassies across the world, and trying to protect and stop, acts of violence and hatred. We thought, I think people thought with the election of Trump, a lot of people who were pro-Israel, that these events would stop, this hatred would stop, but we've seen that it clearly hasn't. And my heart goes out to the families of both of the victims.
Yeah, 100%. Again, look, I know, looking at the moving forward, the larger picture, again, like Trump is already advocating for literally every man, woman, and child of Gaza to be packaged up, put in shipping containers, and shipped away. Their land stolen, never to return. And the Israeli government seems totally on board for that. So I guess at the end of the day, I don't know how much worse it could get over there, but to the extent that the right can use this, they will. I'm already seeing the headlines are all over. This is the Free Palestine shooting. That's what they're saying. because they've been really uncomfortable for a year and a half where like, the people they oppose just want a genocide to stop. And when you're in favor of a genocide, it's like, it's kind of uncomfortable to be like defending thousands and thousands and thousands of babies being blown apart. Like that's usually frowned upon. Now they haven't stopped doing that. They're still pushing for more of those murders and everything. But like now, it's all equal. Well, sure, yeah, no, I mean, over 50,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza, but what about this horrendous, monstrous terror attack? That's what they'll do. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing now. Donald Trump bleeding this horrible DC killings based obviously on anti-Semitism, which look, not that it matters to the family. They've lost their family members. You can say this is a terror attack aimed at influencing Israeli politics and US politics, which it is. There's nothing that implies that he killed them because he hates Jewish people. It's very clearly he has a political objective that's obviously worlds apart from the vast, 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 vast majority of those who want a free Palestine and want the genocide to end. They want a ceasefire. But again, it doesn't matter. They're gonna use it for their goals however they want. And we're gonna have more deportations as a result of this. God only knows. Maybe some US citizens. I mean, they want to amp up opposition to the Free Palestine movement. And so, yeah, it's all over. We can show more of the headlines if you want. Like this is what they're going to be using. And it's just every aspect of this is terrible and moronic and self-destructive. And it's the worst sort of developments, the worst sort of news. Apologies, Daria, what, any other thoughts?
I think that this is also gonna kind of possibly change the rhetoric around what we are seeing on college campuses. I mean, I watched the Columbia graduation where they had the president on stage and they were booing her off. So I'm sure that this is gonna trickle down into how they're seeing free speech ran there. Obviously, it's not good for either side of the movement, and it's gonna continue to infringe on both the free speech rights and what we're continuing to seeing as a crackdown on larger political movements.
Yeah. Yeah, and just we got to move on to the next bill, and I'm sure we're gonna be talking about this more. But like, I feel sick to my stomach seeing Donald Trump's goddamn message about that. Like, so unacceptable. How could they do this? How could they do? Dude did not give a damn when right-wing conspiracy theories spread in part by some of his biggest donors of like replacement theory have led people in multiple instances to grab guns and bombs and shoot up, destroy synagogues because they've been convinced by the right wing that Jewish elites are bringing migrants in to replace good white people. Oh, they've loved that stuff. It gets their base riled up, super excited and everything. They haven't had a problem with that. When they've got their neo-Nazis marching in the street, when they're talking about Jews shall not replace us, they don't got no problem. All they have is defensive words towards those doing the marching. But when it's in this particular case, they'll pretend that they're so utterly aggrieved by it. Which is why, again, sometimes it's convenient to be consistent and to always be against civilians being killed, to not have to look at the news and choose on a case by goddamn case basis which civilians can be slaughtered and which can't. And well, I guess I have to allow this one because I don't want to criticize the government that's doing it. Oh, there's a donor that really likes when these sorts of civilians are slaughtered. So I guess I won't say anything here. Sometimes it's just like a little bit cognitively simpler, and I would say fundamentally more moral to always be against civilians being killed. But unfortunately, that's for regular people. That's for you and me, that's for activists. The politicians, they have to have a little bit more nuance about when you're allowed to gun down or blow apart civilians. Anyway, if you can't tell, it's a disgusting day in the news, even more so than before. It's not like yesterday was a picnic, but with that said, we have to move on to other news. Jumping into this.
For my Republican colleagues who are sure what is in and not in this bill, in this process that has been this rushed, when you wake up in the morning, you will realize that you voted to defund Planned Parenthood and to take away health care from 13.7 million Americans. And when this country wakes up in the morning, there will be consequences to pay for this.
And I only hope that those consequences are fast enough to stop the bill from passing in the Senate and being signed by Donald Trump. I don't have a lot of hope for that, but I appreciate what AOC is saying. And there will certainly be political consequences to the GOP, even if they fully succeed. They got it through the House, the big bill, they get it through the Senate, Trump, there will be consequences. But just to be clear, the GOP at this point doesn't really seem to care about that, because they know that the way American politics works is you do the big thing, you transfer trillions, and then maybe you lose an election or whatever. And then maybe people move on and they don't think about it so much, and maybe you get back into power. It's not like they can take the trillions of dollars back, unfortunately. But that said, it isn't a done deal. Maybe it can still be stopped. And if it's gonna be stopped, people like AOC are obviously going to be a big part of that. And so I'm happy to hear her speaking out. But let's just be very clear. I've been saying this whole last week, we cover the disagreements. Oh, some Republicans think they're cutting too much. Others are saying you're not cutting enough. But what did I say the whole time? They're not gonna pass up an opportunity to give trillions of dollars to their donors. And what do you know? They worked it out and they passed the bill in the House. And now it was narrow, 1 vote margin, which is why theoretically having a Democratic Party where you don't have multiple members of your dead tragically dying of old age in office is important when votes are coming down to a single vote. But anyway, the big gift to the billionaires has actually been passed, and all around the country, right-wing media, super excited about that because they've been successful in at least temporarily deluding their viewers into thinking that this has anything to do with them, that this will help out their lives. They know it won't, but remember, these right-wing media members are all universally millionaires who will benefit from the tax benefits in this bill. And those same Republican voters in many cases, super excited about the passage of the bill, apparently not understanding or caring that trillions of dollars are being transferred from them and their families and being given to Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all of that. Now, they will learn, as AOC alluded to, it's difficult not to understand what's happening when you're thrown off of your health insurance and then you get spit in the face by a Republican politician calling you a lazy parasite. So they will learn that lesson tragically. I wish they didn't have to, but unfortunately for now, I think many of them are very happy. And so we're gonna discuss a little bit, we'll get into the details later, but I just wanna let you know, like, going forward, what's gonna happen from this. And one big thing that's gonna happen that we haven't talked about much is Medicare. And I know what you're probably thinking, wait, what are you talking about? Medicare? Medicare is not a big part of this. Medicaid is a big part of this. They're cutting Medicaid by hundreds of billions of dollars. No, they're also cutting Medicare. And again, you might be like, what? I haven't seen any reporting about. No, they're not cutting it in the bill. These are very slippery little reptiles we're dealing with. No, what they're doing is they're so thoroughly shredding the revenue that the government will be taking in that what they're setting up is automatic cuts to Medicare that will happen in future years because so many trillions of dollars are gonna be added to the deficit and the debt that it will necessitate automatic cuts to Medicare. And that's a part of the story that unfortunately hasn't been talked about much. Even we haven't talked about it nearly enough. But this bill has, basically it has it all for the right wing, and we will dive into the details as I said. But first, Daria, this is the first chance with you on our show. You've had a chance to talk about this. It has passed the House. What do you make of it?
I mean, Republicans have pulled off something genuinely impressive here. Like, they've managed to call a $2.3 trillion deficit explosion responsible governance while simultaneously promising not to cut Medicare. And kind of like you alluded to already, it's gonna happen. It's triggering an automatic Medicare cut. It's kind of like when you promise your spouse that, I'm not gonna spend any more money, but you're actually maxing out your credit cards instead. You're gonna feel it in the next election cycle. It's just very convenient here that they're trying to make it seem like it's something that it's not. People are gonna feel it, they're gonna feel it, but who won't be feeling it and who will be feeling better are definitely their billionaire buddies and friends because they have delivered on one part of their promise, their tax cuts.
Yeah, and imagine if, like, in your metaphor, you're super irresponsible with money, you keep like dooming the family's finances, and when it comes out that you've done that, your partner leaves you. But then 4 years later, they get back with you, and then you do it again, and they leave you, and then 4 years later, they get back with you. 4 years after that, why wouldn't you max out the credit cards at that point? There doesn't seem to be any memory. They keep getting back together with you and you got to spend all this money. And that is unfortunately the state of America. This has happened over and over and over again. And voters either can't learn the lesson, can't retain the lesson, or fundamentally don't care. Maybe they just really, really care more about stopping trans people from playing high school sports. I don't know. I want to hope that that's not what's going on here, but it's really looking like they care so much about that they're willing to see our financial house be absolutely set on fire. But that said, I do want to talk about those details because they are important. This bill has everything. Basically, it's like if you took fundamentally the philosophy of right-wing politics and then you turned it into one bill, it would be this. And let me give you some details that'll really sell that. So this is going to increase the resources going to the top 10% and lower incomes for the bottom 10%. That's according to the CBO. That's all Republican politics is making sure that what little money the government takes in goes to benefit the wealthiest people in the country, the wealthiest people truly in the world, the wealthiest people arguably in history. And those who are struggling the most will inevitably and unerringly struggle more thanks to the GOP, despite the fact that many of those people were voters for Trump. Now their lives are going to become much harder. This bill is going to slash nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. The loss in resources would be due to the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. The wealthiest 10% would see an increase in income, mainly because of reductions in the taxes that they owe. But I know what you're thinking. Wait. Okay, sure, they'll get most of the benefits from the tax cuts. They'll get the majority, right? But even if I only make 100,000, 50,000, 20,000, I'll benefit too. Nuh-uh, we'll get to you in just a sec. But first, I also want to remind you, as AOC did earlier, 7.6 million, according to the CBO, will be uninsured 10 years from now, thanks to the cuts to Medicaid. Other estimates put that as high as 14 million. So 7.5 million, 14 million, a measurable percentage of the entire US population will lose health insurance thanks to this. And according to some, that could end up being bad for Trump and the Republicans. Take a look at this.
There's obviously a significant issue of folks potentially losing access to their health care. But if you think of the political problem, folks have always asked, what is it that's going to drive Donald Trump's voters away from him? Well, losing their health care may actually be the answer to that question.
Oh no, say it ain't so, ghost of JD Vance's past, but he might end up being right. Once these people start getting kicked off, they're probably not gonna like that. Now, of course, as you can tell from the fact that you can see his face, that's from quite a few years ago, but he wasn't wrong there. Remember, Trump tried to kill the ACA. If it had not been for John McCain, he would have succeeded. He tried to throw way more than 14 million people off their health insurance, and maybe they'll get to that. Maybe that will be the next big, beautiful bill. But for now, we've got the 14 million. And before we jump into the conversation, I said that I would allude to those at the lowest level of the income ladder, who might think, and I might have even said this, that the estimates showed, well, they'll get like $100 back in tax cuts or whatever. No, according to the most recent analysis, those in the lowest income quintile, annual income of 17,000 or less, they will see their after-tax income cut by $1,035. Meanwhile, the top 0.1% will take home an additional 389 grand. And they needed it because they were only in the top 0.1% already. I mean, how many mansions can you buy on a yearly basis with that? Like 10 at most. But those who earn 17,000 will lose 1,000. They only had 17,000. I don't even know how you can screw them over more, but they found a way. The Republicans did, Daria. What do you think? Oh, Daria, I believe you might have muted yourself.
The entire plan is honestly ridiculous. You have all the tax goodies front loaded and all the spending cuts back loaded. It's like a political layaway plan, basically. And you can tell that it's not good from the fact that it passed 215 to 214, which in political terms means like we barely convinced our own people that this isn't completely insane. And they know it's insane and they know it's gonna hurt older people down the line, but it's just the fact that they don't care. Like you said, Trump has tried to get the ACA in his first term and now he's back here. He doesn't care if your granny gets her medicine. He doesn't care if your son has diabetes and he won't be able to afford his insulin. That is not his priority. His priority is continuing to get rich and richer. And he's accomplishing that very well. He just got a brand new jet. So, they're they're gonna see all of this loaded in the back end. And maybe JD Vance's ghost will be right. The voters will finally wake up and say, hey, maybe Donald Trump wasn't for me.
Yeah, and maybe there will still be a US government left for that to matter in regard to, but we'll stay tuned, we'll find out together. In any event, a couple more details before we close out this conversation. Obviously, they're doing all this stuff with work requirements because never forget that the Republicans, when they look out at America, all they see is parasites. They think that every one of you is just trying to get one over on the government. You've got $17,000 and you think you need more. Meanwhile, every one of them was taking massive loans that they got canceled during the pandemic. Elon Musk has been given billions by the government, but we're all parasites. Never forget that. In any event, it's not gonna lead to more people working who were just playing Xbox. Many studies have shown that when you do the added work requirements, that's not actually what happens, because contrary to the myth that they're weaving, there's not millions of people who are just sitting at home and refusing to work. Many of them do work. They can't necessarily reach the number of hours because many of them do have significant health problems. But anyway, yeah, continue with the myth. That'll be fun. Oh, also, so they're cutting SNAP benefits. It's believed, according to the Urban Institute, 5.4 million people will lose their food stamps. I just want to remind everyone, if you're on food stamps, you can't afford to lose food stamps, but millions will. And they're going to put a more significant percentage of the total costs onto the states. Many of those red states are going to be perfectly happy to just cut the food stamps. They didn't care about it in the first place. And also, millions more kids won't get SNAP benefits because there's a change in the bill that would require that you could only get it if both of the parents have social security numbers, because they don't want kids of undocumented migrants getting the food stamps. So I just want to remind you, in their example, these hungry children are citizens, but they're the wrong citizens. They're citizens who have one parent who's a migrant. And so who the hell cares if they starve to death, honestly? All of this is just baked into the bill. And we did get, I think there was 2 votes against it. Wasn't enough to actually stop it, but we're just gonna briefly give a little bit of credit to one guy who's willing to be honest about the bill. This is Thomas Massie, take a look.
Well, I'd love to stand here and tell the American people, we can cut your taxes and we can increase spending and everything's going to be just fine. But I can't do that because I'm here to deliver a dose of reality. This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week they sent us a message. We're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg. If something is beautiful, you don't do it after midnight.
That's a good line. Yeah, if everything that the House was doing is so popular, which we know from polls it isn't, why are they doing it when everyone's asleep? Is that a little bit suspicious? Why are they treating this fabulous bill that's going to usher in a new golden age? Why are they treating it like the Patriot Act? Isn't that a little bit strange? Now, everybody bear in mind that if it was up to Thomas Massie, he'd cut all this spending. Like that is his fundamental problem. It's not that people are losing access to the benefits. He thinks you need to do more cutting because of the debt. So he's not necessarily in agreement with us on what needs to happen, but at least he tried to stop the bill. Plenty of other Republicans were like, this is unacceptable. I'm gonna be dignified. And then they just voted yes for it when it came down to it. So that's fun. Any other quick thoughts, Daria, before we round things up?
I'll give them credit for one more thing. They had these MAGA accounts in the bill at first, and it was supposed to deposit $1,000 for every new baby born. In 2026, they decided to change the name from MAGA in the last minute to Trump accounts for the babies. Not much better because, as Representative Joe Nagu said, if they were called Barack accounts, they would have a conniption. So, I don't know if MAGA accounts are better or Trump accounts are better, but I'll give them at least credit for thinking through some branding strategy on that.
Yeah. And by the way, some people have pointed out the fun little appropriation going on in this, that it was a MAGA account, and now it's a Trump account. It was Cory Booker's idea. Like, he was the one who proposed this years ago. Now it's MAGA. Anyway, okay, we're gonna take a short break. We come back, lots more to get to.
You held the cough in the whole time.
I did, and I'm feeling great. I want to lay on the floor, but that's not even the sickness. It's probably just the news. Anyway, Mr. Funktastic Dragon says, glad to hear you're feeling better. J Damage, when did I say I was feeling better? But thank you for being here. I appreciate that. Noster Science says it's Thursday, TYT live at 10 a.m. Do you know where your democracy is? I'm checking my milk carton for an old picture of it. Yeah, we can't even cover everything that's in the bill. As AOC talks about in the extended comments, they're deregulating silencers for guns in the bill. It's like everything's in this. They're making it harder to get student loans. They're making it harder in particular to get loans to go to med school when we have a massive shortage of doctors in this country. It's like every possible terrible thing, most of it coming from Project 2025, is crammed into this one bill. Now, CDN Norse Dog Dad gifted a membership. Thank you, super nice of you. B166ER gifted 20 again. Thank you, always nice, thank you. Ronald Came sent 5. Thank you, Ronald, appreciate it. Okay, let's see. Bread to Bulldog Dragon, member for 30 months, says, my favorite show on YouTube. John, can you please help promote the National No Kings protest June 14th? I did not actually know about that particular one, but it is going to be a nationwide series of protests organized by Indivisible. Okay, so June 14th, I'm gonna learn more about it. We can promote it more in the future, but thank you, Bread to Bulldog Dragon, for raising it on our radar. The Atheist God Dragon, member for 41 months, says, are we sure the Golden Dome isn't a scam that secretly funnels money into a hair transplant made of pure gold? That's very funny. No, that's not the sort of scam it is. It's a scam that publicly funnels money into defense contractors. It's that kind. No hair needed. Anyway, B166ER says in a super chat, you know it's gonna be a rough day when John wears a tie. Yeah, let's start to normalize people being terrified when I put a tie on. Anyway, Gargoyle Dragon says, I keep remembering the crash of 08 in a faux news segment that boiled down to, what are the poorest complaining about? They have all these appliances they could hawk for food money. I mean, yeah, I remember for years when Bill O'Reilly's defense against people talking about poverty was, hey, they have TVs. I mean, if you have a TV and you have a refrigerator, are you really struggling? That's what they said, and people bought the message. Neil Whittington says in a super chat, I'm turning 67 in 2 years. With this POS illegally in office, I may have to wait till we dump Trump to retire. Oh, and his is not a death threat. No, I know that you didn't even spell it out in shells, so no, there was no ambiguity there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of me says retire while you still can, because God only knows what the retirement age will be in a few years, how they might jack that up. Anyway, Gargoyle Dragon says in super chat, my favorite moment from this is watching Iowa Representative Marionette Miller Weeks running from reporters, so the GOP does support women athletes. I did not actually see that, but I will have to look it up. Thank you, Gargoyle Dragon. Okay, on Twitch, Zoe's Return has been here for 43 months, thank you. Mapwa 54 months says, let's go. No, let's stay. Let's stay and watch. After the show is over, you can go. Unless you're hanging out for the members content, the members hang out. Chris Huggy, 45 months, thank you. Granny Dragon, 55, thank you so much. Tie-dyed Terra Dragon, 42 months says, woo, John, dressed up for my 42-month sub-anniversary. Lol, love you all at the Damage Report. You keep me sane. Thank you, we're trying. And Rainy in Portland, 6 months says, thanks for dressing up for my 50th birthday, John. Well, happy birthday over in Portland. I hope it's not too rainy today. Anyway, okay, we're gonna turn away from the big news. We're gonna turn to a couple of lighter stories, a little bit of fun after this. Long Beach Dragon with a good idea. You should add the shells to the opening. We should add the shells to the opening. You know, producer Ashley just put together some example images that we could do, as if I'm ever gonna update the opening animation. But anyway, that might have to be one of them. Can you remind me of that, producer Ashley? That would be right next to you. Okay, with that said, let's turn to whatever this is.
What does it take from you for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that for President. It's for him. No, seriously.
I'd rather have him answer.
Yeah, I'd rather answer that.
I'd rather have him answer it because I don't really care. It's a conspiracy theory. I'm spreading it because I think some of my white voters will like it. And Elon Musk seems into the idea. So I don't really want to have to like give details because I don't know the details because I don't care. I don't really care about the theory. I don't care about South Africa. But some white Republicans believe it. Tucker talked about it. This whatever. You explain it. So anyway, that was a meeting of heads of state, technically, where Donald Trump is using an opportunity to talk to the leader of South Africa, and instead he just starts spreading things that he was told by Stephen Miller, who read it on 4chan. And it actually got worse from there. Trump decided to turn this into just a full-on airing of all aspects of the conspiracy theory, and you're gonna see some of the lowlights here.
These are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death, 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 horrible death, death. I don't know.
But you know that
Pick anyone. White South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning.
People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now
The
been
farmers are
utilized.
black. The farmers are not black. I don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
Yeah, so yet again, you have Donald Trump who is being told facts and he likes the myth better, it's useful to him, and so he just ignores it. And again, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about these farmers. The stack of articles that were handed to him, did any of those look like he had thumbed through them? Like he knew a single one of those names? No, he looked up at it, he chose a word, and he just read it because he doesn't care, because he's not fundamentally that interested in it. The appearance of the leader of South Africa here is an opportunity for him to send a message to his base, who's been perhaps uncomfortable about the actual genocides happening around the world, where Republicans are never gonna stand for the civilians who are being wiped out, but it is convenient to be able to cosplay caring about genocide, so you invent one. Conveniently, that makes white people the persecuted minority in this particular case, but it's not true. The line of the memorial, that's not a real thing. It's not true. The New York Times reported 225 people were killed on South African farms over a 4-year period ending in 2024. So as of the most recent data that we actually have, of those deaths, 101 were black, current or former workers living on farms. 53 were the farmers who are usually white. So as the head of state there says, the majority, even in this case of the farmers, are still black people. The vast majority of those who are killed in the country from violence are black, but those literally do not matter to Donald Trump. He does not care. You're not gonna have black farm workers from South Africa being shipped over to America to flee the violence. It is convenient to focus on white people, whether it's factual or not, that's it. We have more. Apologies, Daria, what do you make of this?
You know, I have to commend the head of state of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, for maintaining his composure so well. It's kind of like when your racist uncle like corners you at Thanksgiving and is saying probably inappropriate stuff, and you just kind of like have to calm him down and say it's okay, uncle. Except this one has nuclear codes, and you can see him looking at the screen and thinking those are not burial sites. It's literally a protest, but there's like no reasoning with Donald Trump. And then you have Elon Musk over there in the corner kind of being like the apartheid whisperer. And it's clear that this is what Elon wanted to happen, and we're taking our cues from the person who destroyed Twitter now. So I guess this is what our meetings in the Oval Office and in the White House have come to.
Yeah, I just look, this is a ridiculous story. This is not the worst thing that happened today. It's why it's not first on the rundown. There's far worse and more significant, damaging in terms of violence, in terms of economic stories. But this is the sort of BS that I was really hoping to avoid having to cover. Back during the campaign, when some people were like, hey, if Trump wins, I bet your job will be easier. There'll always be news. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want this to be what America is. It makes us look ridiculous around the globe. I don't want conspiracy theorists, those who are spreading obvious fake news, to have the most powerful person in the world on their side. But that's unfortunately where we're at, where we just look so ridiculous. And look, obviously this is hardly the first time that racism has driven what's happening in the White House, sort of a trend throughout American history, but it's pretty confident right now. It's pretty pleased with itself. Elon Musk loves, because Elon Musk knows that this is all BS, but he loves that being what people think of when they think of South Africa, that it's really rough for white people there. And historically, that's probably how it's been. There's one more added ridiculous moment that happened though. So Trump is going off on the media and he's saying that it's insane of them that they've criticized him for accepting that $400 million bribe, which he did. That happened. So the biggest bribe ever in American history is not hypothetical anymore. It's already happened. Bribes don't matter anymore. Because if you can take that bribe, there's literally no bribe that will ever count because it'll never match up in sheer scale. And so he's talking about it. And Ramaphosa, like he doesn't really know what to say. Like he has nothing to do with it. So he says, I wish I had a plane to give you, which is like not good for America. That like heads of state are all like, I can't bribe him as good as Qatar did, I suppose. And Trump says, I wish you did. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it. Now, the middle part about the Air Force getting is obvious the lie. The end part is the truth. I would take it. I'll take that massive bribe and it'll be mine. And this is what our foreign policy is now. Just airing conspiracy theories so that Jesse Waters has something to talk about, and then hoping that you get like a really nice present or whatever. Any actual problems of human rights or trade or whatever that might be happening between the US and South Africa has nothing to do with literally any of this. This is what our government is, Daria.
And to that point, he also brought pro golfers to try to diffuse the situation, saying, hey, look, if they were really killing all that many white people, with these really successful professional golfers come and play on our courses. So, I mean, I think if he offers him maybe a resort or two, Trump could take that. Trump would take it.
And again, I'm gonna end with this. So let's say that his conspiracy theories were actually happening, and there was a campaign to wipe out these white farmers. And it was just devastating. Month after month after month, you have the territory that these white farmers live in being attacked and they're dying and it's tragic. Well, then in that case, why isn't he consistent? Treat it like you treat Gaza. All those white farmers should be removed from their land and the land should be taken and given to South Africa, to the people attacking them. That's what you want for Gaza. Is it that there's something else that's actually influencing it? Is it that at the end of the day, this is entirely about race and the facts don't matter? And 7 farmers having been killed or whatever is more important than 50,000 Palestinians? Because he's sure acting like the numbers work out that way. Anyway, goddamn, the hour's passing so fast. We're gonna take a break. More news to get to on the other side of this. Trump's womanly ass says they're eating the farmers, they're making them into soup. Yeah, everything isn't just awful. Everything is so stupid, so beneath us that that we are ruled by the dumbest people in the country. Okay. Cray Cray Souffle says, yeah, the South African president got from his visit to the White House what is now being referred to as getting Zelensky'd. I mean, it's not as bad, I guess, as Zelensky. He wasn't being attacked as much. He was effectively being called a liar as he was stating simple facts. But yeah, this is what these meetings are now. If you're a foreign leader, I don't know why you would go. I don't know what the point of it is. Winston says in the Twitch chat, Musk wants to make South Africa Twitter again. Kind of. That's sort of the model. And hell, if he could get every person in South Africa to pay him $8 a month, he'd probably be fine with that too. Drenched Wildfire says bribed lives matter. Jesus. Franklin Sharpslicer says, as with anyone, sooner or later DJT will croak, and that would leave us with a different bloke. Maybe even with that, the world will take a break, losing the head of the snake. Don't spell it out in shells. Okay. Corporations Ate My Baby says the hour's moving fast because John and Daria have big sparks when they spit truth. Yes, well, we're covering some pretty big stuff here. Knuckle Dragon says they're eating the dogs, they're killing the white farmers, Kofefe. Yeah, nothing matters. It's all just what's convenient to say. Denorian says, as a former Walmart employee, how many people working at Walmart won't meet the work requirements? Yeah, depending on how it's listed. I mean, again, the requirements are set to get people off of the program, to make it impossible to meet. Not just in terms of the number of hours that you're required to do, but the constant checking in, the constant paperwork and all that. They know that when states have set these work requirements higher, it just puts people off who need the aid, who are actually trying to work. They know that, they like it. Again, they have to generate some money somehow to defray a little bit of the cost of what they're doing in regards to the billionaires. Okay. X-Dog, the security dragon, says the apartheid whisperer is the best. Daria, that was very good. Congrats on that. Cabbage says he's moving them South Africans from their land, John. The hypocrisy is no Palestinians can move here. Well, no, like he's moving them to here. Again, he's not just sending them to Libya or sending them to like some slum or something. He's lifting them up as the model migrant. They're literally the only refugees that can come into America right now. They're not being cast aside and thrown to some slum where they will likely languish, many will die. They're being lifted up as the only deserving migrants in America based on conspiracy theories. Boomer Dragon Cat says, I honestly don't feel like this is real life. I must be in a never-ending nightmare. Are you sure we aren't in limbo? Yeah, no, it's a sort of nightmare on a daily basis. And in some ways worse than we suspected it would be. I mean, I knew that if Trump got elected, it would be bad, but I don't think I could have predicted quite a bit of this stuff. I didn't know that the bill would be quite this bad. I knew that they were going to do the tax cuts and everything. I knew we'd do tariffs. I didn't think the tariffs would be as bad as they are. I didn't think that they would be so openly willing to remove habeas corpus, free speech, all of that, but they do feel emboldened. They didn't get a mandate, but they're acting as if they have one. It turns out that you can just do that. I'd love to see the Democrats try that out sometime, particularly when they win by far larger margins than Donald Trump ever has. Unfortunately, it's probably not gonna happen unless an actual progressive gets elected. God help us. Okay, more news. Yes, as I'm reminded in the chat, don't worry everyone, we've only got 873 days to go. Well, we've got 873 episodes of the Damage Report left to go. We also have the weekends, but maybe you can tune out a little bit on those. In any event, let's jump into an update to a story we talked about earlier this week on how exactly Donald Trump and Elon Musk fell out.
You've talked about $4 billion a day being saved, but that won't get, which is, and I think everyone can agree that combating waste and inefficiency in government is a very good thing. But if you add that up, it's not going to get to 2 trillion over the lifetime of DOGE.
I'm sorry.
The 4 billion a day, if DOGE is going to run till next July, is not going to get you to $2 trillion. But you still say it's your aim, so we'll take that as read.
There's what DOGE. I mean, I feel you're somewhat trapped in the NPC dialogue tree of a traditional journalist. So it's difficult when I'm conversing with someone who's trapped in the dialogue tree of a conventional journalist, because it's like talking to a computer.
Yeah, I think the interview probably wishes she was talking to a computer rather than to Elon Musk, but that's unfortunately who she was stuck with right there, because she's just laying out, you've said certain things, even with your own math, it's never gonna add up to what you said you were gonna do. And he doesn't have anything substantive to say to that. He has no answer when it comes to doggies cuts that are gonna make him look good or rational or intelligent. So instead, what does he do? He just does what he sees on Twitter. You're an NPC. You're a computer. You're in a dialogue. Dude, you're literally in the middle of evading a question. I wish that was part of the dialogue tree. Honesty, forthrightness, being direct, being transparent. It would be great if those were one of the options, but unfortunately it's not. And it's not just Elon Musk that's not being transparent about all of this. Even his position as the head of DOGE, they keep saying he is, but when it matters legally, all of a sudden they're pretending that that's not the case. So we have an emergency action filed with the Supreme Court. It has to do with producing documents requested by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington into what's been going on with DOGE. And in it, DOGE is argued to be just an advisory group, not an actual federal agency. And also Musk, government lawyers say, is not a part of it. Now, originally they said, well, he's not the head of it, even though he is the head of it. Now they're saying he's not even a part of it. And so, wait, why is he answering questions at these interviews? Why is he doing these appearances if he has nothing to do with it? Again, the dishonesty is just so constant. And I think part of that does get into why he was never gonna last that long in government. He's so bad at doing the lying. He's so uncharismatic. He's so obviously dishonest. But legally, it could end up coming back to bite him. Now, we'll get into the fallout between Musk and Trump in a little bit, but this could be the waning days of his involvement with DOGE, which he is still involved in, regardless of what government lawyers say. But Daria, what do you make of what you saw?
Definitely. And it's interesting the way that he's trying to sort of frame his departure as a sort of eventual triumph rather than a retreat, where it's clear that they just don't like him anymore. And one thing he said, DOGE is a way of life like Buddhism. Buddha isn't alive anymore, and you wouldn't ask the question, who led Buddhism? So it's like, are you comparing yourself to Buddha, the person who has been firing federal workers and completely dismantling ways of life and aid for like citizens? Is that what Buddha would do? Yeah, it's just a lot of delusion.
Yeah, she can only say so much in one interview. She can only ask so many questions, and she's focusing on the sort of the top line figure. You've made these lofty promises about how much you're gonna cut, and it's not gonna happen. And he can't accept that, even though he kept cutting down how much he was estimating he will be able to cut. But if you actually did a post-mortem or a mid-mortem on DOGE, what would you have? He came in, he cut a bunch of stuff that has to do with groups that he doesn't like. And so he saved us $20,000 on a gay comic book here, $40,000 on a trans opera there or whatever, which adds up to literally nothing when it comes to the federal government. So he did a bunch of that. Any group that's composed of people that make him uncomfortable or whatever, they don't get funding anymore. So he did that, he succeeded in that. Let's see, he made Social Security not work as well. He stole Social Security money from a bunch of people that deserved to get it by saying that they were dead when they weren't. He so fundamentally misunderstood how government computers work that he kept spreading these conspiracy theories that 150-year-olds are getting benefits when that's not at all how that works. He hasn't generated the actual savings. He's imperiled the ability of many government agencies to work by firing people that we need to do work, like tracking diseases, bird flu, those sorts of things. He's made it significantly harder for America to exercise literally any soft power around the globe. And thanks to a lot of the cuts that he did and then had to roll back, might have ended up costing the US government money rather than actually saving it, even as he takes away programs that people depend on. And so she can't go through all of that, let alone all the other things that have been accomplished there. But just like the answer to all of that, your utter inadequacy, the failures, is not you're an NPC, you're an egg. But this is what brain rot is. He spends so much time on Twitter that that's the only way he knows how to communicate. Anyway, look, we're running low on time. I think we're gonna set aside the drama stuff, I think, until tomorrow, because we have Daria. I want her to be able to weigh in on the Supreme Court, and we have enough time to talk about that last thing. So apologies everyone, I've been being irresponsible with my time, but let's jump into one more topic while we still have Daria. Against all odds, the conservative Supreme Court actually smacked down an attempt by the government to fund religious charter schools. Or maybe not smack down. They basically went even 4-4 on it, but I want some good news, and it didn't work. So let's just enjoy it for a second. So it was 4-4. Amy Coney Barrett actually recused herself because she has previously been involved with the educational organization that's involved in this. And look, she recused herself. I wouldn't have expected that. That is good news. She is a religious radical who could have just refused to recuse herself, as others, including Alito, Thomas, have refused to do so even when they have clear biases in a case. But she did actually do so. And so I have no doubt that she's being shredded by the MAGA movement right now. And one conservative joined the liberals. We don't know who. My guess would be Roberts, but I don't know for sure because that hasn't actually been revealed. And if you want to take this not as a great bit of news, but kind of negative that 4 of our Supreme Court justices effectively want to end the separation of church and state, then sure, that is scary. But it is good that as of right now, it isn't gonna, the block that had been set up to stop the funding for this religious charter school is not gonna be overturned. Now, unfortunately, because they didn't actually rule against it, it hasn't set any sort of lingering precedent that you can't do this, and they could pick it up in the future. But with the sort of the baseline of this being set, Daria, I'm very curious about you have the legal background. What do you make of what the Supreme Court has done here?
Definitely. So Oklahoma's own AG is the one who sued to block this. So he created sort of an intra-party constitutional crisis that's been splitting the conservative legal movement. You've got the religious liberty abolitionists on one side and the state sovereignty purists on the other side, and they're both trying to defend these conservative principles, but also like suing each other to oblivion. And to your point, I think they didn't really count the chess piece of Amy Coney Barrett coming into here, because obviously she has ties to Notre Dame and the Religious Liberty Clinic, and they were both kind of catastrophic here. So someone at ADF should have really played the war game better and gotten their legal strategy together so they could have counted the votes properly, because what we're left with now is just sort of like a hung jury. We have 4 and 4. So this issue could come up again. We're pretty much in a deadlock. I would guess it was probably either Gorsuch or Roberts who sided with the liberals. And the Roberts court has continued to play this sort of game of, are we gonna stay legitimate? Are we gonna not? And they live to fight another day, I guess.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I guess that would maybe be, I still think it's probably Roberts based on how some of the voting is going. But you're right. Gorsuch has occasionally differentiated himself. So do you expect this to come back up soon, or like would they be hesitant to try to raise it again so soon after, when maybe they wait like a term? What do you think?
Absolutely. I feel like every education lawyer in America right now is playing like, guess the next case, like who has the best claim to take it up right now. And religious liberty groups are like shopping around. They're looking for the perfect plaintiff, where they have to find someone where Amy Coney Barrett has absolutely zero conflicts, so they can get her in on this and present it in a way that's she's gonna be the deciding vote basically. So they're gonna have to look for someone who she would like, she'd be sympathetic to. And it's gonna be honestly very lucrative for these constitutional litigators in the years to come.
That's definitely true. There was actually I think 2 episodes of John Oliver ago had to do with some of that stuff. But yeah, look, I understand that it's a complicated legal matter. Some of the religious charter schools say that if there is government money going to these other organizations, why shouldn't they have access to it? And I'm not a believer or whatever, but I'm sympathetic to that. And so I do think that the government should be fair. And so no money should go to any charter schools, secular or religious. How about that? Maybe that'll make it a nice level playing field. And look, I'll end on this. The conservatives think that they're being super clever here, where they're like, hey, how can we help to kill public education? Well, we just siphon off even more of the money to go to charter schools, to go to religious charter schools, and it'd be totally cool. But obviously, if you do that, then you are setting the precedent that other sorts of religious schools could be set up and could receive federal funding. And I know many Republicans would not like to see that. They don't want madrasas being funded by the federal government. That said, the joke is probably on me, because they know that a principle that has been applied that doesn't seem to favor any religion in practice in America always ends up doing that. But that said, still, this could be a thing that they end up coming to loathe if they do end up succeeding on it. But I apologize. We are out of time in the first hour. Daria, it's always a pleasure to have you. We didn't get to have you for a full episode, but we want to have you back very soon. So thank you.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, John, and the Dragons. Of course. Check me out on TikTok, Instagram, and everywhere else.
Yes, everyone, if you want a much more in-depth of Daria's thoughts on this and other recent SCOTUS decisions, definitely follow her on TikTok. I'm gonna take a short break, everyone. Abdul El Sayed will be with us to talk about his run for the Michigan Senate on the other side of this, so don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Aftermath, one and all. John here. Daria unfortunately had to go, but we'll hopefully have her back in the very near future. I will be doing a little bit more news to close out the show, but before we get to that, we have a special treat, the rare interview on the show. So why don't we transition into that? Joining me once again on the show after too long of a gap is the new hopeful for the Democratic Senate in Michigan. Returning to the show, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on the show.
It's great to have you here. We talked back in 2020, very different world then. A lot has happened. You're hoping to make your mark on the Senate, and I know there might be. I've seen in the chat a lot of people in our audience are very familiar with you as we were promoting it earlier on the show. But if you'd like to take an opportunity to introduce yourself, let people know sort of what your candidacy is founded on, and then we can dive into some of the issues.
Yeah, John, I appreciate that. Look, my name is Abdul El-Sayed. The one title I always wanted was doctor. That's how growing up, I spent a lot of my childhood summers in Egypt, where I hung out with my grandmother. She lost 2 babies before the age of 1 of 8 to whom she gave birth. When I'd go to Egypt in those summers, I'd travel about 15 hours and 10 years difference in life expectancy. But I could have gone 15 minutes into any neighborhood in the city of Detroit from where I grew up just north and traveled the same gap. And I wanted to fix that problem. So I became a doctor. And you learn to ask 2 questions: what's wrong and how can I help? And too often you'd have people in your clinic, and the challenges that they face when you ask what's wrong had a lot less to do with physiology, had a lot more to do with the pathologies in our politics, whether or not they could breathe clean air or drink clean water or afford their groceries or come to see a doctor in a clinic without having to worry about falling into debt. Those challenges, that pain, it was exploited by Donald Trump to come to power, and now he's using it and weaponizing it against the very folks who brought him to power. You look at the Medicaid cuts in that big ugly bill. You look at the SNAP cuts in that big ugly bill. You look at the way that he tanked the global economy to pass a stock tip to his billionaire friends. You look at the ways that they're gutting cancer research, like the one last bipartisan thing that the government even does. And you realize that we can do so much better, but it requires us to actually speak to the pain that people are facing. And too often, as I know you talk about all the time on this show, Democrats can't do that because the very corporations who are rigging the economy are paying contributions through PAC checks into their campaigns. And so they find this message that is not really a message at all, but it's said with a lot of enthusiasm because some consultant said so, that you paid with that corporate PAC check. I'm running the kind of campaign that speaks truth to power, but also speaks truth to pain, speaks to what it would look like in our country if people actually had the power of a union behind them because they could form one or join one, what it would look like to make this the best country to build and scale a small business, what it would look like to guarantee healthcare in the richest, most powerful country in the world, what it would look like to free us from the need to burn fossil fuels so that we could keep paying more to turn on the lights for people who can't even keep the lights on anytime the wind blows. That's the challenge that people face across my state. Those are the conversations we're having. And so I'm grateful to be able to run a campaign where we can speak honestly about the pain people feel and speak truth to power.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of that pain already out there. As you alluded to when you referenced the big ugly bill, there's going to be a lot more of it probably soon. There's estimates of 7 to 14 million people who might lose their health insurance thanks to the right's gleeful rush to hand trillions of dollars over to the wealthy. But so you mentioned healthcare there. You mentioned money in politics as well. I know that Medicare for All is something that you care deeply about. I can see your book in the background there. And we don't know exactly what this primary is going to end up looking like in Michigan. We don't know exactly what the Democrats' messaging strategy will be for those midterms, but are those topics that you think should be sort of front of mind? It definitely seems to me like in 2024, there wasn't really a unifying policy to the candidacies. Is it time to go back to that?
You know, John, I want to just bring this up, and it's a pretty crazy thing that this dude murdered another guy in cold blood because he was an insurance CEO, and it's never okay to murder anybody in cold blood. But the fact that the outpouring of rage and support happened to be on the side of the murderer, and that was like a bipartisan thing, it should tell you that people are deeply frustrated by our healthcare system. And I want to be clear, when we talk about Medicare for All, they try to code this as being some sort of a handout for the lowest income people. And I'm perfectly okay with making sure we take care of the lowest income people in our society. But it's not even about that anymore. Like if you have private insurance, You get your pay garnished every 2 weeks or 4 weeks for the privilege of being able to pay a $4,000 deductible to get the healthcare you thought you already paid for. The average point at which people actually pay off that deductible in America right now is in June. So functionally for half the year, you're not even insured, you still gotta pay. That's for privately insured people. Now they're gutting Medicaid and they're trying to privatize Medicare through Medicare Advantage. This is an underlying issue that Democrats, if we had the courage of our convictions, should be talking about. But the reason we don't is because too often the corporate checks coming from private health insurance corporations, coming from big pharma, they're so deep in our campaign accounts that, well, people don't want to talk about it. And I kind of want to talk about it because it's the reason I became a public health professional. It's the reason I went into politics in the first place. But you cannot disentangle a lot of these challenges. The choices that we make about where we spend our money, that's what government does. And right now we're spending it dropping bombs on other people's children rather than investing in our schools. We're spending it in the form of trillions of dollars in tax cuts to the richest people rather than investing in our healthcare. We're spending it in ways that cement corporate power in our politics rather than freeing ourselves of that very same corporate power. And the difference that we're seeing right now is not actually between left and right. I just want to be clear about that, right? A lot of folks are like, well, those are left ideas. This game of left-right is a thing that was created to help people who consume politics by sport to understand the political system. It's not a real thing. It exists in our minds. The real differentiator right now in our politics is between people who have to show up to work tomorrow and people who don't. And I want to advance public policy that frees them of the ways that corporations monetize their lives in some huge ways. And I want to fight for working people. And I think whether you code yourself as a Democrat or Republican, right now it has gotten way too hard to survive in the richest, most powerful country in the world. We can fix that by addressing the public policy and the politics that is allowing too many of the richest people to rig this economy on their behalf.
Yeah, and again, that big bill, another big step in the direction of exactly that. Now, you've been very critical of a lot of these policies throughout. I know that you've been advocating for the Democrats in general to be harder and tougher and more vigilant in the way that they oppose Donald Trump. Presumably you disagree with the idea that they should all just play dead like some longtime political advocates have said. But so what form should that come in? Like who's been doing it well? What should Democrats be focusing on in taking a stand against Trump? Are there any things that you think they should not focus on, let slip by? Like, what's the strategy in terms of how you stand up to this administration?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. Number one, if you're elected in this moment, you got to realize that there's more to your job than the procedural part. It's not just about the votes you take, it's about the leadership you show. It's about the way that you can have conversations about the issues at play, and it's about using that position, that platform, to move the conversation in the direction you want it to go. You think about the OG, Bernie Sanders, and the ways that he's been leading. You think about AOC and the ways that she's been leading. You even think about somebody like Chris Murphy, who has recognized that the old way simply wasn't cutting it, and we've got to be honest about the fact that if we spent the last however many years yelling about the risk to our democracy writ large, you cannot now turn around and be like, oh, well, he's the president. And so you've really got to lean in on the leadership part of the job and show that leadership in the conversation that you have with the public. I think that taking votes that put a rubber stamp on people who can't do the jobs when it comes to confirmation, whether it's in the judiciary or it's in the appointments that he's making across the bureaucracy, that's not going to cut it either. RFK should not have earned a single Democratic vote. My man doesn't know the first thing about science, and now we're seeing the consequences when it comes to HHS. Similarly, you think about the fact that Marco Rubio was like the consensus choice, and look, now they've got him wearing 3 hats and he doesn't wear one particularly well in the first place. So I just think that there's a responsibility to leverage your procedure behind the leadership that you show about what you've been saying and what we continue to be saying about what it means to live in a democratic republic. When they're disappearing people off the streets for signing onto an op-ed, that's not normal behavior. When they're sending people to an impenetrable facility, SCOTUS in El Salvador, because they may have violated what is ultimately their documentation status, that's not normal behavior. That is not consistent with any form of constitutional rights in our society. And so we've got to start acting the part. And you can't just tell people one thing and after the election then kind of go back to normal because it's nice to be a senator or elected representative and the haircuts are free.
I didn't know that. That's actually a nice little perk for them. They work so hard to earn it, by the way. But anyway, I want to focus on one area of the electorate that I know you've been thinking a lot about, and there certainly was a lot of talk about in the lead up to the election, coming out of it. But young men, everybody's super worried. Are they like irreparably on the Tate Trump train? Are they done? Never vote for a Democrat again? What do you make of the state of young men? What is your pitch to a young man to support your candidacy or politicians like you?
Yeah, look, I understand why a lot of young men are frustrated in this moment. And I want them to understand that the people who are exploiting them politically don't have their best interests at heart. You know, I was raised with the notion that being masculine wasn't about hating on or hurting people who you perceive to be weaker than you. It's about empowering and protecting and promoting. And those people who tell you that somehow the successes of women in our society come at your cost, they don't want you to actually look at the ways that you're being exploited by huge corporations that, by the way, all the policies that they support benefit. I mean, you think about all of the, I hate to say it, like all of the purely parasitical corporations that have arisen over the past several years. You think about the gaming industry and the ways that they've taken just watching a football game and made it something that people who have addiction to gambling, right, problematic gambling, that they just can't do anymore, right? Because it is so pervasive there. You think about, I supported legalizing marijuana, I still do. But I also think that needed to come with some regulation about where and how you market it, about the ways that we allowed that whole sector to consolidate in ways that made them yet another force that could rig the economy and rig our politics to benefit themselves. And now you've got marketing of cannabis in places that we know are preying on people who have problematic use. You think about porn and the pornification of like literally everything. I just think that a lot of times folks have been short-circuited, and because these things are pleasurable in the short term, folks think that, well, they're good for you. And I hate to say it, but like we all know the consequences of that. They may feel good in the moment, but over the long term, they can be really pervasive. And I think the problem on the left is that too often the conversation we've had has been blaming people for their own victimhood, right? Every time you hear the word masculinity, you hear the word toxic that comes with it. And so we would never talk about any other group of people in this way, but somehow, right, this group of people that's being preyed upon by corporate interests and hijacked in so many ways, we then blame them for the pathology they're experiencing. And so I think on the left, we have to have a much more coherent conversation about the challenges facing young men, about the ways that they're particularly vulnerable, about the need to be able to feel and be a part in community. And I also think part of it is like, yo man, get up early, go to the gym, make your bed, go to class, go to work, right? These are the things that, all of us kind of have to do if you want to be a functioning member of society. But the reason it's so hard is because there are a lot of corporations bearing down on you, trying to monetize you in ways that are really, really, really hard to set down. And I think we got to have that conversation as well.
Yeah, one quick follow up on that, because this is something that I talk about a lot on the show. I agree. I think men are facing all sorts of different challenges. And I think one of the sort of explicit political challenges is, I think you rightly point out that there's all these corporations that are exploiting them. I also think there's a lot of members of the media that are exploiting their very real fears and anxieties and sort of weaponizing that. Not with, in my view, the goal to ever actually make these men whole or set them off on the path for a great life. I think that they're perfectly happy to keep them broken for the rest of their lives, so they'll keep tuning in and everything. But a lot of young men trust these people who I think are exploiting them. I don't know if you agree with that, but how do we convince them that there is a different path when, as you point out, maybe those, what I might label grifters, might be the only people that have been sort of trying to appeal to them, but maybe not for the best reasons? Like how do we get through to them on that?
John, I really appreciate the point. And I just want to say, I come at this as a father of daughters, right? Both as I can't credibly call myself young anymore, I'm 40, but as somebody who's recently a young man, and also somebody who wants my daughters to grow up in a world where their success isn't pointed to by their brothers, right? To say, oh, well, they succeeded and therefore I couldn't. And the point that I just make to the bros out there is it doesn't feel good to hate, right? Whatever these people are peddling you to tell you that the challenges you have in your life is a function of some woman over there. Like, I want you to actually interrogate that. I want you to think about your own mom. I want you to think about your sisters. I want you to think about the people in your life you love, right? What does it look like to step in to a life where we're not so lonely and not so angry and not our pain isn't weaponized by somebody to tell us that the only way around it is right back to those same people who keep breeding all that hate in you. It doesn't feel good to hate. It doesn't feel good to distrust. It doesn't feel good to be lonely. And my point is that if somebody's selling you those things as a solution to those very things you're trying to get away from, they're probably lying to you and they're probably grifting you. And you're seeing that out of the Andrew Tates of the world and so many folks in the manosphere. And I think we could do a lot better.
I hope so. I hope that we do. Well, I also hope that this won't be the last time that we check in as you move towards that primary. We're going to be following the candidacy. Hopefully we'll get to talk from time to time. For now though, where can people follow more about your campaign?
Yeah, I really absolutely look forward to coming back. Go to abdulforsenate.com. I hope folks will sign up. We need volunteers and we don't take corporate money. So we rely on you, $5, $10. And I hope that you'll join us. It's a long race. We're fighting the good fight, but we're also fighting to win the peace, not just to win the war. So I hope folks will join us, build the kind of America that we are proud to live in and that we know that we can be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abdul. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And for those of you out there, I'm going to read a comment or two before we move into one final story. And I think we'll probably move on to G, I assume, for time. But let's see. Quaker Lady, member for 48 months out there, says work requirements for people in rural areas are near impossible to meet. There are very few jobs in the area where I live. They already struggle. Yes, but what you're talking about is like a real life, and to understand that would require empathy or curiosity, and that has no part in any of this legislation. But anyway, yeah, no, I obviously agree with you. Spanking Spider Dragon, member for 26 months, says you're my TYT crush. Thank you. The GOP is actively trying to kill millions of people. Trump needs to be removed from office before his policies kill us all. Yeah, and unfortunately, he has the least likely cabinet in history to ever invoke the 25th. Impeachment can't really accomplish anything right now. I would love to see it happen. I really would. Okay. Neil Whittington, New Clue Dragon, says MAGA means morons are governing America. I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what it meant, stood for. Anyway, and Stab Dragon says they are eating the dogs. They are eating the. I love that everybody knows that's an impersonation of Elon Musk, even before you get to the label of it. But I appreciate the super chat. Thank you. Okay, with that, I have a little bit of voice left. Let's jump into this. The bad news continues to roll in, both for Donald Trump and for some corporations that are kind of carrying his water and doing what he asked them to do. And it has to do in part with Trump's tariffs, which are wreaking real havoc on the economy and on some major corporations like you're seeing there, Target, we're gonna be talking about in this segment, but also those corporations, because he came in and said DEI is done, we're not doing it anymore. And Target seems to have agreed with that, and that is not really helping them out over the past few months. And so let's do a little update. We check in every once in a while. Sales at Target fell more than expected in the first quarter. Everybody knew it was gonna be tough times, but it's even tougher for Target. And the retailer warned they will slip for all of 2025 as its customers, worried over the impact of tariffs in the economy, pull back on spending. But Target also said that customer boycotts have done some damage during the latest quarter. So they've cut their annual sales projections as of earlier this week. The company now expects a low single-digit decline for 2025 after projecting a 1% increase for sales in March. Comparable store sales, those from established stores and online channels, fell nearly 4%. That includes a nearly 6% drop in store sales and nearly 5% increase in online sales. That reverses a comparable store sales increase of 1.5% in the previous quarter. And I believe this is as of yesterday, they dropped about 3.5% as a result of the bad news that they were announcing. So it didn't help out their stock price literally at all, bringing them to just shy of a 40% loss in the last 365 days, which, look, it's been rough for the stock market generally, but particularly for Target. I mean, a 40% loss in the last year, that's like Tesla numbers that they're experiencing right now. And some of it's gonna be, people not wanting to go to retail stores necessarily as much, people worried about the economy. There's some meta stuff, and certainly Donald Trump's tariffs have not been helping people. But we know that Target has been one of those big manufacturers that has been targeted by, pun intended, a lot of these boycotts that we've been reporting on. And that really does seem to be hurting their ability to bounce back from this. Other retailers are down, but not down nearly as much because they haven't gone so far out of their way to stick their thumb in the eye of people. It used to be committed shoppers. And it really feels like Target had a couple of years of people who didn't necessarily shop at Target at all, posting TikToks about how furious they were that they saw like a pride section, and Target has massively overcorrected in wanting to reassure conservatives that they don't give a damn about anyone who isn't white and straight. They seem to have turned off people who were enthusiastic shoppers. And just as a business strategy, like, I'm not a businessman, you don't have to listen to me, but you can look at their sales, you can look at their stock price. This doesn't seem like a great strategy that they've been pursuing. And at least for now, the boycotts are not going away. And why would they? Target hasn't changed. We previously talked about the Reverend Jamal Bryant, who had initially a 40-day boycott. He's called for it to be extended and has just announced a protest to bring attention to particularly the black customers of Target who've been boycotting the company. And so when you're not doing anything to win these people back over, I don't know why. Look, we have people in the chat saying, they used to go to Target. I love Target. There's Targets everywhere. And it's not the only, I don't want to just focus on Target. Walmart has been facing a lot of these boycotts as well. Other corporations have too, but Target seems to be having just about the toughest job of digging out of the hole that they're in. And so let's jump into a little bit of their actual response. We'll close out with this. Target is intensifying efforts to entice customers who are nervous about the economy and inflation. They say they're offering 10,000 new items starting at $1, with the majority under 20. Target has reduced the number of its store label products sourced from China to 30% now from 60% in 2017. The company's on its way to reducing that number to 25% by the end of next year. And they're shifting sourcing to Guatemala and Honduras and looking to source in the US as well. So that part is speculative. That was supposedly going to be the results of all these tariffs. That hasn't actually been the result. They're moving away from China, but still a lot of these products are being produced in other corporations. So that might help with some people who are just worried about prices. But for those who have an actual problem with what they see as Target turning their backs on the LGBTQ community, turning on black-owned businesses, both things that Target has moved away from, they have so far done literally nothing to reassure those customers. And maybe it'll take a couple more quarters of these negative numbers for them to finally get the message. In any event, that's all the time we have for the show. We will be doing our members hangout in 34 minutes. So if you're a tier 3 member on YouTube, definitely stick around for that. I will possibly be here tomorrow with Brett Ehrlich for the Friday show. We will see what is left of my voice at that point. I do want to remind you of a few things though. Not only the members hangout, but also May 30th, Friday, 2 Fridays from now, I'm gonna be at the Elysian Theater for a live taping of The Habituation Room. You can go to thelysiantheater.com for tickets for that. I also wanna just give you an early heads up that 2 weeks from now, Jordan and Yaz are gonna be taking over and leading the show. I'm gonna be out spending time with my family, with my daughter, because my normal part of my childcare is gonna be out of town. So I'm gonna be picking up the slack. So, but it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna have a lot of Jordan, a lot of Yaz, JR and Sharon and Brett, and I believe Jackson's gonna be there as well. So a lot of fun. So definitely tune in for that and show your support for them as they take over the show. For now though, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. We'll see you soon.